What if Brazil's next big advantage isn't another superstar on the pitch, but a former star standing on the sidelines? The name now generating fresh discussion around the Brazilian national team is Filipe Luís. The former Brazil international has already made a successful transition from player to coach, and now his growing connection to Brazil's national team setup is raising an intriguing question. Could Filipe Luís eventually become part of Carlo Ancelotti's coaching staff? If that happens, Brazil could have something extremely valuable. A world-class European coach working alongside someone who deeply understands Brazilian football from the inside. Filipe Luís is not just a former international. He is a player who spent years competing at the highest level of European football, experienced the pressure of wearing Brazil's famous yellow shirt, and built a reputation through his performances for Atlético Madrid. Now, as he develops his coaching career, those experiences could become just as important as anything he achieved on the field. Filipe Luís understands what it means to be a Brazilian footballer, but he also understands the demands of elite European football. And that combination could make him a fascinating figure for Brazil's future. During his playing career, Filipe Luís established himself as one of the most respected left-backs of his generation. His time at Atlético Madrid was particularly important. Under Diego Simeone, he became part of a team known for its defensive organization, tactical discipline, intensity, and extraordinary mentality. Playing at that level for so many years gave Filipe Luís a unique perspective on how elite teams operate. He was not simply defending his own side of the pitch. He was constantly involved in tactical battles, positional adjustments, pressing structures, transitions, and the psychological side of high-level competition. Those experiences can be incredibly valuable for a young coach. And now Filipe Luís is putting that knowledge into practice. His move into coaching has attracted attention because of the way he approaches the game. Rather than simply relying on his reputation as a former player, he is building his own identity on the touchline. That is exactly why the possibility of him working with Ancelotti is so interesting. Carlo Ancelotti brings decades of experience managing some of the biggest clubs and biggest stars in world football. His greatest strengths include tactical flexibility, calm decision-making, communication, and perhaps most importantly, man management. Ancelotti has repeatedly demonstrated that managing elite players is about much more than drawing up formations on a tactics board. It is also about understanding personalities, maintaining confidence, controlling pressure, and creating an environment where talented players can perform at their best. Now imagine adding Filipe Luís to that environment. The Brazilian could bring something Ancelotti does not naturally possess to the same degree: an insider's understanding of Brazilian football culture. Filipe Luís knows the mentality of Brazilian players because he lived it. He knows the expectations surrounding the national team. He understands the emotional importance of the Brazil shirt and the enormous pressure that comes with representing one of the most successful football nations in history. That could become particularly important when dealing with younger players. Brazil has an extraordinary generation of emerging talent, and many of these players are entering European football at very young ages. They must adapt not only to different tactical systems but also to new languages, cultures, expectations, media pressure, and dressing room environments. A coach who understands that transition personally could become an important bridge between the players and the coaching staff. Filipe Luís could potentially help Ancelotti understand what Brazilian players are feeling, what motivates them, and how they respond to certain situations. At the same time, he could help younger Brazilian players understand what Ancelotti expects from them tactically and professionally. That two-way communication could be extremely valuable. There is also another important factor. Filipe Luís understands European football from the inside. His career took him through some of the most demanding environments in Europe, and his years at Atlético Madrid exposed him to an incredibly sophisticated tactical culture. He knows how European teams defend, how they press, how they control space, and how small tactical details can decide major matches. That knowledge could complement the Brazilian creativity and individual talent that have always been central to the Seleção. And this is where the potential partnership becomes especially fascinating. Ancelotti could provide the experience of a manager who has won major trophies across different countries and worked with generations of elite players. Filipe Luís could provide the perspective of a former Brazilian international who has experienced the national team from inside the dressing room and spent years competing at the highest level in Europe. One brings the global managerial experience. The other brings a deep understanding of Brazilian football and the player's perspective. Together, those qualities could potentially create a very strong coaching dynamic. Of course, it is important not to get ahead of the facts. At this stage, the idea of Filipe Luís joining Ancelotti's staff should not be treated as a confirmed decision. There is a major difference between discussion, speculation, and an official appointment. But even the possibility is enough to create an interesting conversation about the direction of Brazilian football. Brazil is not simply preparing for one tournament. The country is also thinking about how to build a sustainable football structure for the future. Ancelotti's arrival represents a desire to combine Brazil's extraordinary individual talent with a more structured and modern tactical approach. Bringing in people who understand both Brazilian and European football could fit naturally into that broader vision. Filipe Luís could potentially be one of those figures. His experience as a player gives him credibility with the squad. His international background gives him an understanding of the national team environment. His years in Europe give him tactical knowledge and an appreciation of elite football culture. And his transition into coaching gives him an opportunity to turn all of that experience into something new. Another major advantage could be his relationship with young players. Brazilian football has never stopped producing exciting talent, and the challenge for the national team is not simply discovering these players. It is developing them, managing expectations, and helping them become consistent performers at international level. A former player like Filipe Luís could potentially communicate with them in a way that feels more natural. He knows the journey because he has lived it himself. He knows the excitement of receiving a national team call-up, the pressure of playing for Brazil, the criticism that comes after a poor performance, and the expectations that come with representing a football-obsessed nation. That personal experience cannot simply be learned from a coaching manual. It comes from years of living the game. And if that experience is combined with Ancelotti's tactical and managerial expertise, Brazil could potentially benefit from a coaching partnership built around two very different but complementary perspectives. However, there are still plenty of questions. Would Filipe Luís actually join Ancelotti's staff? What role would he have? Would he focus primarily on player development, tactical work, communication, or another area? And perhaps the biggest question of all, could this relationship eventually become part of Brazil's long-term coaching future? Those answers are not clear yet. But one thing is certain. Filipe Luís is no longer simply being remembered as the experienced left-back who played for Atlético Madrid and Brazil. He is increasingly being viewed through the lens of his coaching potential. His journey from elite player to coach could become one of the more interesting stories in Brazilian football over the coming years. And if his path eventually crosses with Carlo Ancelotti at the national team level, Brazil could have an intriguing combination of experience, tactical knowledge, Brazilian football culture, and player understanding. For a national team searching for the right balance between its traditional identity and the demands of modern football, that combination could be extremely important. So, what do you think? Should Filipe Luís be part of Carlo Ancelotti's coaching staff with Brazil? Would his experience as a former Brazilian international and elite European defender make the Seleção stronger? Or should Brazil look elsewhere for additional coaching expertise? Let us know your opinion in the comments, because this could be much more than a conversation about one former player. It could be a glimpse into Brazil's next generation of football leadership.